Today's training is presented by Pro Bono Net in partnership with LSNTAP and the Northwest Justice Project, with funding provided by an LC TIG grant. And with that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Thanks so much, Jake. Hey everybody, my name's Adam Friedel, and I'm the Pro Bono Coordinator with Pro Bono Net. Today's webinar is Innovations in Technology-Enabled Pro Bono. I'm really fortunate today to have the opportunity to present with some great colleagues and friends. With us we have Miranda Watkins, who's the LawHelp Interactive Coordinator at Pro Bono Net, Carolyn Coffey, who's the Supervising Attorney of the Consumer Rights Project at MFY Legal Services, and Liz Keith, who's our LawHelp Program Manager at Pro Bono Net. So the things that we are going to cover today are some different examples of specific technology-enabled pro bono initiatives. We're going to go over LawHelp Interactive and document assembly. We're going to talk about an innovative program in New York where we're using video conferencing to do remote unbundled legal consultations. Another New York project, which is called the NYC Consumer Debt Defense Clinic and Forums, using a few different forms of technology to help pro se litigants be able to defend themselves in consumer debt cases. And last, but certainly not least, Liz is going to talk to us about some of the latest innovations in mobile and remote technologies. So in addition to kind of going over the details of these different programs today, what we'd really like to do is talk in addition about sort of the considerations that you want to take into account when you think about either starting a new pro bono initiative or incorporating technology into an existing program. To paraphrase Field of Dreams, I think many people believe that if you build it, they will come, or that if you're excited about a technology idea, that everybody else will be too, and they will immediately see how incredibly valuable and useful it is. It turns out that at least occasionally that's not the case, and the sort of history is littered with tech projects that were great ideas that didn't catch on for one reason or another. And so we want to focus on, the details around your planning, your project planning, specifically what to think about when you think about incorporating tech. What things do you want to take into account? Considering what volunteers need to embrace new and unfamiliar models. And keeping in mind that none of this happens overnight, or the legal services tech empire was not built in a day. So we're going to talk about some different strategies to, engage people, make sure that you are using your technology in a way that really services their needs and also makes them feel comfortable and like they're getting a valuable experience from it. So we'll go over really quickly some goals that I think are common for tech-enabled programs. For the pro bono programs themselves, they're new pathways for volunteers to learn about and engage in pro bono programs. For pro bono lawyers, they offer enhanced support, access to expertise, and new forms of volunteering, and we're going to see examples of each of these in the different presentations during the hour. And for clients, ultimately, of course, it's about the clients, and we want to be able to offer them greater resources and efficiencies and increase our services to underserved clients and communities. And there are a number of different ways to do this, either in office-based technologies and sort of clinic and more standalone-based, and then in remote, which Liz is going to talk about as well. So to get started, I'd like to turn it over to Miranda Watkins, who's going to talk to us about LawHelp Interactive and the power of document assembly.
All right. Thank you, Adam, for the warm introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. So my name again is Marinda Watkins, and I'm the LawHelp Interactive Program Coordinator at Pro Bono Net. And as Adam mentioned, I'll be talking today about LawHelp Interactive technology and pro bono projects. Thanks. So LawHelp Interactive, or LHI, is a project of Pro Bono Net. And we train our partners, which are generally legal aid organizations and courts, to create interactive forms similar to LegalZoom or TurboTax that can be used to create legal documents and forms. We also host a national server where these interviews can be uploaded for easy access, and we provide technical support to our partners and end users of the forms. In addition, we facilitate the sharing of experiences and best practices through our monthly partner calls, as well as an active listserv. We provide in-person and web trainings and a web resource center. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a bit of what the interviews look like. So advocates, volunteers, or self-represented litigants can answer a series of questions that are presented in an interview. And there are two types of interviews we support. One is hot docs, which is pictured in the top left corner, and the other is the A to J author interface. So the A to J software was designed to be particularly user-friendly to support self-represented litigants. Once users answer questions in the interviews in either format, they're able to assemble a personalized and high-quality legal document. So next slide, please. Thanks. So the majority of LHI users are self-represented litigants, but there is a growing number of advocates and volunteers who are using these forms in various models. Some pro bono volunteers are using LHI to provide direct representation. For example, lawyers will use the forms that can be designed with built-in substantive knowledge to create pleadings and represent clients in areas outside of their legal expertise. Another type of use is limited scope or unbundled legal services, where attorneys can provide remote review of pleadings completed by a litigant in another setting. Then there's also pro bono attorneys using LHI to provide legal information or referrals to potential litigants, and using the interviews to screen potential clients for representation. So we'll hear a bit more about specific pro bono projects using this type of technology later on in the presentation, but this is sort of an overview. So I just talked a bit about how this particular technology tool can be used in a pro bono setting, but wanted to briefly cover sort of why use it. So interactive forms can be helpful because they can provide standardized content. They can eliminate some of the geographic and physical barriers with volunteering. And more broadly, technology can do that in the pro bono context. So for instance, it's not exactly a forms project, but you'll hear a little bit more about technology overcoming these barriers when we hear about the Remote Family Court Volunteer Attorney Program in New York a little bit later in the presentation. But again, in the forms context, forms can be used to allow information to be reused and used efficiently so that volunteers aren't spending their volunteer time filling out biographical information over and over again, for example. One of the supervising attorneys at Bethesda Legal Services Conservatorship Clinic talks about the value of this technology in that setting for volunteers, because instead of spending their time checking boxes and putting birth dates over and over again, the volunteers are really able to focus in on litigants' stories and finding out more about what litigants want out of the legal process. Forms can also lessen training time, or they can enhance training by including checks and balances or calculators. So some forms, for instance, can have statutes built in to refresh volunteer attorneys in terms of a substantive area of law, or they can have checks and balances that prompt volunteer attorneys to think about additional legal issues. So if there's an order of protection interactive form, it can prompt the volunteer to think about child support implications of the order of protection process. And these forms can also reduce the amount of paperwork that needs to be stored or shared between litigants and pro bono volunteers, and that has a lot of great effects, including the ability to increase the mobility of volunteers. Thanks. So I covered some basics about this technology in a pro bono settings, how it's being used, why it's being used, and I wanted to shift a little bit to talk through some strategies and considerations on how to build tech pro bono programs that are successful and how to think about getting volunteers to embrace these programs. So I have two more slides, and they're really more tailored to talking about starting and implementing interactive forms projects. But these strategies and considerations can also be helpful in thinking about other tech pro bono contexts. So when thinking about starting a tech pro bono project, for instance, partnerships are key. So if you're doing a forms project, you want to make sure that you have the support among court staff where the forms may be filed. So the court staff is familiar with these forms, and it's confirmed that they're able to accept these forms and pleadings. The forms are going to be more useful for pro bono volunteers, so the volunteers will be more likely to embrace them. More generally, it's helpful to seek the support of various members of the access to justice community when creating forms or incorporating technology into a pro bono project. These stakeholders can be helpful in planning, implementing, as well as maintaining tech pro bono projects. So also think broadly about potential partnerships for technical pro bono projects. Public libraries, for example, may be an important location to build partnerships for tech pro bono projects. This is because libraries have users who are seeking legal information and assistance oftentimes, because of the location of libraries and because of the technology or computer labs that may be already built up or easily built up into these types of locations. You also want to plan these types of projects well in advance and involve partners early in the planning process to have a more effective and utilized tech pro bono project. You want to build in time for delays so that you can respond to unanticipated challenges and new ideas that you may get from these partnerships. And also some flexibility and willingness to compromise can go a long way in building partner support and moving these types of projects forward. So this is just a summary of some of the lessons learned by organizations who implemented document assembly projects in the past. And these lessons can be applicable in planning tech projects in pro bono settings. So again, thinking creatively, both at the beginning of the project and to maintain a project is critical. Thinking outside the box in terms of non-traditional funding sources can help to sustain these types of projects. In the forms context, strategically choosing forms that are going to be accepted in courts will be cost-effective and can help with volunteer buy-in. But more broadly with technology, thinking strategically about what technology can be implemented in a meaningful way into a pro bono project. So is a pro bono project in an environment that has super locked down computers and technology, or is it going to be at a law firm where there may be some advanced technology that can be utilized to further the pro bono project? Learning from other jurisdictions' tech pro bono projects can be valuable. So Minnesota, as an example, has a very strong and successful pro bono expungement interactive forms project. If you're in another area and you're looking to start an interactive forms project dealing with expungement or reentry issues, it may be beneficial to reach out and find out more about what's working in Minnesota. Another thing that people who have started document assembly projects have found to be helpful is finding a champion that can be someone to sort of support the project as it begins and as it moves forward. So this could be a judge or it could be a law firm partner, for instance, someone who folks will listen to and who understands the value of technology in different settings and can be somebody who has the power to move these things forward if there's bureaucracy, for instance. So champions are important, but broader support of projects, again, is important. So not just your champion, but also other organizations and members of the legal services and volunteer community. Being thoughtful about the scope of the project is important. Tech pro bono projects can be extremely valuable, but they can also take a lot of planning and development up front. So it may be ideal to start with one or two forms for a forms project to think about the complexity of the forms when starting the forms project. You'll hear a little bit more about LawHelp in a bit. It may be useful to start with thinking about one or two short shifts of LawHelp as opposed to sort of a more aggressive beginning. And the next 2 points can be particularly useful in thinking about how to get volunteers to embrace technology in pro bono projects. You want the technology to be familiar to your staff and your volunteers and a natural part of their workflow. You also want to think about how you're training staff and volunteers and making sure you're training them and providing ongoing training support in a way that fosters and develops a certain comfort level with the technology, so that once they're comfortable and well-trained on the technology, they're able to actually use it in a way that's more efficient and that can save time and allow for focus on sort of the better aspects of pro bono volunteering as opposed to some of the nuts and bolts part. Promotion of tech pro bono projects is important. Volunteers need to be made aware of these types of opportunities before they can embrace them. And then the last point is just about evaluation. Evaluation can help tech pro bono projects because the results of evaluation can be used to show why they work. They can be used to secure additional funding, and evaluation results can be used to improve what isn't working so well and think about strategically what can work better. So that's sort of my introduction to LawHelp Interactive in the pro bono setting, and I know we have some time set aside for questions towards the end of the presentation, so feel free to ask me any questions you may have, and also feel free to contact me via email, and thanks for your time.
Great, Miranda, thanks so much. Absolutely. I think that was a really helpful overview of LawHelp Interactive, but also a lot of the strategies that I'm hoping we'll talk more about today. In just a little bit, not this part, but the next part of our presentation, Carolyn Coffey is going to talk to us about a specific document assembly project that she has been deeply involved with that I think will illustrate a lot of the points that Miranda was just making about planning, project planning, and document assembly. But before that, to build up the suspense, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about our New York Family Court Remote Volunteer Attorney Program. So this is a program that is not using, at least not yet, using document assembly, but is using video conferencing along with scanning and what we call remote IP printing to enable attorney-client limited scope consultations to happen over potentially great distances. And I think that a lot of the considerations that Miranda mentioned around sort of partners, finding a champion, etc., have really come into play with this project. So just to give you a little bit of background about why we sort of took this up, these numbers are fairly old. They come from a report that came out a few years ago from the Fund for Modern Courts, but I think they're pretty illustrative of the problem, and if anything, they're more severe now than they were in 2005. The number of dispositions per judge in family court is over 2,000 that each judge has assigned. In Supreme Court is the next highest, which is really a quarter, essentially a quarter of that number, 525. In Supreme and County courts and criminal courts, it's half of that number still. And in the Court of Claims, which is a sort of special court that we have in New York that handles suits against the state itself, there's 63 dispositions per judge. So something like, I'm not really great at math, but I think 1/30 of the number that family court judges are dealing with. Another way to think of it is that in 2006, 127 family court judges were responsible for 680,791 new filings. So you can see that family court is pretty overwhelmed, and if you have the I guess opportunity is a good word for it, to spend any time in New York family court, you'll see that that's definitely the case. Moreover, the percentage of litigants who are not represented in family court is higher than 80%. And of course we're talking about cases where some of people's most important and sort of life-changing things are in play. The custody and care of their children, child support issues, orders of protection, which is just a New York term. Many people call it restraining order in other states. But oftentimes life and death issues are being decided by in these cases, and the services available to help the litigants and to make things easier for the courts are just very minimal. So the Family Court Volunteer Attorney Project was started in New York City by the State Courts Access to Justice program, and it provides free, discreet, unbundled legal advice provided by volunteer attorneys to unrepresented litigants. And the way that it works, basically, is that the volunteer attorneys go down to one of the local family courts in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, or the Bronx, and they volunteer a morning or an afternoon to do a series of consultations with pro se litigants who come into the help center looking for assistance. They are 15 to 30-minute sit-downs. They sign a limited scope services retainer saying that there's no attorney-client relationship once the consultation is over. But during that brief time, the litigant can ask them questions, tell them about their case, and get not only particular advice around their particular facts and circumstances, but also, and I think many times just as important, an orientation to the family court and the process. Many people have never been in court before. They don't know what to expect, or their expectations are really informed by what they've seen on television or Law and Order, and they don't really have any sort of reliable information about what things they need to prevent, what sort of things are going to be relevant in their case. And so just a few minutes of a volunteer attorney's time to alert them to some of these important issues can make an enormous amount of difference for somebody's case. So it's a great program in some, and it's been really successful. Volunteer attorneys like it. The courts like it because it provides for more informed litigants, and more informed litigants make for a smoother process in which judges spend less time explaining to people the basics of sort of how court works, and more time actually deciding cases and moving people through the system in an efficient way. The challenge in New York City has been that there was one area of the city that was severely underserved, and that was Staten Island. Staten Island is one of the 5 boroughs, in theory just the same as Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx, but it's very, very difficult to get volunteer attorneys to travel to Staten Island to do pro bono work. There's no subway that goes there. You pretty much have to take a ferry unless you want to drive a long way and pay a really expensive toll to go over a bridge. And it's a real hike. Many folks who practice in Manhattan, I think, have probably never been to Staten Island. And so there were a large number of litigants in the Staten Island Family Court who were not, didn't have access to this really important service. So Pro Bono Net partnered with the court to do a pilot program that would extend the service to Staten Island virtually. Basically, if we couldn't bring the volunteer attorneys to the litigants in person, we would sort of bring their face on the screen for a video conference. In planning this project and how it might work, we had to take a number of things into consideration. As I mentioned, geography was really the major obstacle for why the program hadn't existed in the past. But in addition to that, there was a real lack of resources to support the program in Staten Island. Specifically, there's no dedicated space for the volunteer attorney program. Not that it requires, hold on for just one second. Not that it requires a lot of space, but it does require a small room where consultations can take place, and also a little bit of space where litigants can be sort of screened doing the limited scope retainer, etc. Also, there was no dedicated personnel for the program. The courts here have very few resources, and we're not able to dedicate anybody to or dedicate a clerk to do screening, or a court attorney to, advise people or sort of mentor the volunteer attorneys. So we had to figure out ways to get around those, and I'll talk about them a little more in a minute. But the basic way that we designed the program to work was that we'd use technology to make the services available remotely by using web-based communications technology that allowed the experienced volunteers to remotely consult with litigants. We considered a number of different technologies, but ultimately we decided to use one that was one that the courts already had. It's a third-party system called Polycom. It just happened to be one that they were already using internally, and they felt very comfortable with. The courts had, I think, very understandable concerns around maintaining confidentiality and a number of other sort of, potential technical dangers, or at least perceived technical dangers. And so we wanted to, in the spirit of compromise that Miranda mentioned earlier, use a system that everybody could agree on and felt comfortable with. We also use scanning and remote IP printing to deliver documents back and forth. Scanning is obviously the most efficient way, but in addition, remote IP printing essentially means that you're able to click print on your computer in Manhattan, and the document comes out on a printer in Staten Island. So that after a consultation, maybe it came up during the talk that a litigant needs an additional service or a referral to another agency. If the volunteer in Manhattan has that flyer on their computer, they can just print it out for the litigant, and it comes out on the printer right next to the litigant's chair in Staten Island for them to take with them.
So a quick question. How difficult was remote IP printing for you guys to set up?
It was actually not that difficult. We were very fortunate that we had the assistance of the court's technical staff. everything is done over their sort of like secure hardline network. So it was pretty straightforward, really. And I think that, in replicating it going forward, it's we can set up the whole system in, a day, assuming everything goes all right.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, no, of course. The requirements are really pretty minimal, as I mentioned. You need a computer with video conferencing software, camera, mic, speakers, the printer, and the scanner, secure communication lines, and then a few people who are trained to administer the program. And this is an overview of the process that I'll go over really quickly. Basically, a litigant is screened and then taken to the consultation room. And basically, the litigant just has to sit down in front of the video terminal, and the volunteer attorney will initiate the call to them, the video call to them, and the computer for the litigant is set to automatically accept the call, so they don't have to do anything to the computer. It will automatically pick up the call, and the volunteer attorney will appear on their screen, and they can begin the consultation. If at any point the volunteer has a question or needs some additional help, there's a mentor on call that they can go to ask a question, and then just come back and finish the consultation with the litigant. And then, as I mentioned, we have the printing, the IP printer, and the ability to give any necessary documents to the litigant. So currently, we are in conjunction again with the courts and several other groups, expanding the service to other parts of New York State. Which is really exciting for us, but also really challenging because, as is probably the case in many of your states, procedures and politics and just various considerations are wildly different from one county to the next, all across the state. And so, just to cite one example, there is I would say, a semi-healthy suspicion amongst people upstate who say that, those of us from downstate don't really understand what it's like. For them, they don't understand the sort of problems we don't understand the sort of problems that they are dealing with, and that it's really nothing like what we experience here. And vice versa. That goes both ways. And so there's some truth to that. I think not always as much as people make it out to be. But we are having to really take that into account in thinking about how we are going to modify the system and the workflow in order to provide for those differences. Some of the contributors to success that I think have really resulted from the sort of good planning and the great partners that we've had are that the staff are experienced and they're enthusiastic about the program. So when volunteers come into the program, the staff makes them feel really welcome, feel like they're doing a good job, and it makes them want to come back. And it makes them excited to be a part of this experiment, is what it really is, in a new way to deliver services. We also have, the support of the tech folks who, when I go to them and ask, or have a suggestion about can we do this, or, I think it might work well this way, they can very quickly tell us what's possible from the court's perspective, and that's really helpful. We try to make the workflow as simple as possible, and this is a recommendation, I think, for any time you're using technology to deliver services to litigants, and especially, pro se litigants, is you want it to just be as simple as possible. The technology should be, in many respects, I think, almost invisible. Like, that it should really be sort of just a detail in how things get done, and it shouldn't be sort of the main thing that people notice about receiving this service or going to this particular clinic. Lastly, we have worked really extensively to, kind of go out and meet with partners and explain to them what we're doing and what we hope to do, and develop a sense of buy-in from them, which has been really helpful. A few of the challenges I mentioned, the sort of upstate-downstate divide, and along with that, different courts have different staffing models and different availability of personnel that impacts exactly how the program works. And then lastly is sort of maintaining and replicating that good sense of support and really good cheer and fun for the volunteers and the litigants. So that's a really brief overview of the program so far and our hopes for expansion. And I'm, please feel free to email me if you have questions about it. I'll be happy to answer questions more towards the end of this webinar as well. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Carolyn Coffey from MFY Legal Services. Carolyn is one of the premier consumer debt advocates in New York State, and she is going to talk to us about a project that she has really been involved in from the ground floor to help pro se litigants be able to participate meaningfully and preserve their rights in consumer debt cases. So, Carolyn, take it away.
Thanks, Adam. Hopefully everyone can hear me. This is Carolyn Coffey, and I apologize in advance if you can hear the construction work that's going on outside my window, so hopefully it won't be too distracting. We were really excited to partner with Pro Bono Net on the Consumer Debt Defense Project. And I think that both my organization, I run our Consumer Rights Project, but I work at MFI Legal Services, which is a full range civil legal services office with a lot of different projects. But we really thought that consumer law in particular lended itself to using technology and using resources to help pro se litigants and help pro bono attorneys help pro se litigants. And so we've had I think really great success working with Pro Bono Net to get some of these projects off the ground. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm sure some of your offices deal with consumer debt, but I think sort of talking a little bit about consumer debt is helpful because it kind of lends itself to why we thought that consumer debt in particular was a good area to focus our technology experiment on. Most of the consumer debt cases that we see involve lawsuits by debt buyers, and these cases really are brought by these entities that really don't have any proof of any of the underlying debts. They don't have proof that they purchased the individual's account. They've got really, really sloppy or non-existent record keeping, and a lot of these cases are brought against very low-income individuals who can't possibly afford an attorney, and then also most of the debts on average, at least in New York City, are about $2,000, oftentimes less. So it really doesn't even make sense to, it's not really worth it to hire an attorney. And we have the numbers have gone down, but at its peak we had about 300,000 debt collection cases filed in New York City alone. We still have tens of thousands of these lawsuits clogging our courts, and unfortunately only 2% are represented by attorneys, and that's really mostly the legal services community that provides consumer debt assistance to people. So So basically, you've got a lot of cases where there actually are defenses because the quality of the lawsuits themselves are really questionable, and then you have defendants who are not educated, can't afford attorneys, and really are left to navigate the court system on their own, which really is really kind of ripe for reform. So some of the ways that we've responded to this crisis in New York has been by forming these Claro projects, Claro programs in each of, it started off in Brooklyn, and then it's expanded to each of the counties in New York City, and is now expanded upstate to Westchester County and Buffalo County as well. And the way that these work, and I know that some offices even across the country are starting to replicate these as well. It's basically a clinic where litigants who are being sued in debt collection cases can come in and meet one-on-one with an attorney. It's unbundled legal services, just advice only, but they can talk to an actual attorney, bring in their papers, and the attorneys will not only advise them about their upcoming court date, but will help them vacate a default judgment, answer a complaint, help in limited ways with motion practice, help them figure out how to settle a case, at every stage of the debt collection lawsuit process. And the way that the clinics are staffed is that there's sort of one administrator for each one, and students who kind of help with the administrative tasks of doing the initial intakes for the clients and making sure that they actually have a consumer debt case, and then the pro bono attorneys who staff the Claro projects, they do receive training and they do shadow more experienced volunteers, but they are not consumer attorneys, and so they're not completely well versed in the nuances of consumer law. They're not necessarily keeping up to date on changes in the law or regulation efforts or anything like that. And so they do provide a tremendous service, but they're not consumer attorneys. So at every session, there's also at least one experienced consumer attorney, whether in private practice or in legal services, to help answer the more complicated questions, to oversee some of the papers that are being prepared, and to make sure that the advice being given is accurate. These have been hugely successful among the volunteers, among the courts. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the clinics are actually, are actually held in the courthouses, and so we did have the cooperation and support of our local judges and court houses, and that's very, very important when starting a project like this. So they have been really successful. The clerks often refer people to Claro. The judges refer people to Claro, and we've even heard of attorneys representing the collectors who see a particularly sad case off the record, refer people to Claro because they realize that a pro se litigant may have some rights that they wouldn't otherwise know or know how to exercise without talking to an attorney. So, like anything, there are some challenges with this kind of project. In some ways, being the victim of our own success, some of the clinics are just overflowing. The Bronx, in particular, which is a very poor county, and has it's a disproportionate number of poor neighborhoods compared to other counties in the city and even the country. And that Claro project in particular, often has to turn away people who come after the sessions have started. Once you get to 35 or 40 litigants, there's only so much time and resources, and so the fact that we have to turn people away is certainly a challenge. It doesn't happen all the time. We've been able to expand expand the hours and expand the numbers of volunteers, but that certainly is a problem. And then there is a little bit of a learning curve for attorneys who and students who we don't know anything about consumer law, and so, like I said, they do participate in training and shadowing, and we have a handbook for them, but it is a very new area of law for a lot of our volunteers, and then. One of the other challenges, which used to be more of a challenge, is that anything like motion practice is it's very hard to do in the clinic setting. It's very hard to sit down with with a litigant and who's being who's received a summary judgment motion, for example, or wants to file a motion to dismiss, for example. That's a little bit outside the purview of used to be outside the purview of the Claro project, because the idea is that you're providing this one-on-one assistance in a fairly quick way, so that you can get to the next to the next litigant and help as many people as possible. So one of the, in addition to Claro, one of the other ways that we've, as advocates in New York City, have responded to the consumer debt collection crisis in New York has been to provide these resources for pro se litigants. The court itself, as Miranda had explained before, has been very active in trying to address these problems, and has created some documents that people can create and generate on the court's website using this hot docs system, as Miranda described before. And then we also, MFI and Pro Bono Net, put together these other documents for pro se litigants, including a debt verification letter, which is basically it's a very simple letter that we give to people who are being contacted by collectors. You probably have similar letters in your office, and it's easy enough to have a blank form that people can fill in by hand. But the beauty of having this sort of online form is that the person can enter their information once and then generate several letters, and oftentimes people who are being contacted or harassed by a debt collector are not being contacted by just one. So it's certainly helpful to be able to just fill in your information one time, and it can also be tailored to individual circumstances. What's required if you ask for verification of a debt, for example, is different in New York City than the rest of the state, and so the form takes into account whether someone lives in New York City, and then the letter that's generated cites the applicable law. And another example might be if someone receives exempt income, you might want to include that in the verification letter, so that to kind of discourage a collector from pursuing collection. And so that's something else that the form asks and then generates in the letter that's actually generated. So that's really, really helpful. We also created an answer form. The civil court in New York City, with input from advocates several years ago, generated a checkoff answer form, which I have to admit was a vast improvement over the blank answer form that had previously been available for pro se litigants. It was a carbon copy answer form that pretty much just had a bunch of blank lines on it, and the pro se litigant was supposed to figure out what on earth they were supposed to put in an answer when most of them didn't know really what an answer was. And so the court developed a checkoff answer form with applicable defenses that might be pertinent to somebody. But even that is hard for pro se litigants to really understand. And so we created this document assembly for to generate answer forms. And if someone, for example, is being sued by a debt buyer as opposed to an original creditor, then the answer form automatically generates certain defenses that would apply, even though the pro se litigant might not have realized that those certain defenses, like standing, would apply in their case. The way that the system is set up, and it's through LawHelp as well as other locations. But the way it's set up is that when someone does fill out the answer form, the program also generates a demand for documents and asks for proof of the underlying debt, which is their right, and is not necessarily something that a pro se litigant would know that they had the right to do, and to ask for information. And so it takes care of that step right then when someone's filing or when someone's filling out an answer, and it's sort of really, geared towards sort of, all these forms are really geared toward this idea of early intervention, kind of getting someone help before they've lost the case, or maybe even before they've even been sued. So we also developed the similar documents for advocates. The idea was that these advocate forms would be used by legal services offices who hear from consumers, from pro se litigants. We have a weekly hotline, and we try to assist as many people as possible, but we can't represent everyone who contacts us, and that's true of every other legal services office. So there really is a need for being able to not actually represent someone, but still provide them with some assistance if they're being sued. And you can help larger numbers of people. When you're not representing every one of them, you can help more people this way. And rather than reinvent the wheel each time, we have these forms that advocates can use. They can generate multiple documents. There's real uniformity in what's produced, and they're also obviously used in the Claro projects, as well as I think it's the next slide, as well as, or maybe it's not. Sorry. Well, anyway, they're used at Claro. Also, the attorney for the day programs, which we have also established in New York City in response to the overwhelming need for assistance for consumer litigants, and then also, as I mentioned, the legal services attorneys. And so, I think very simply the way the way it works is that you can select which documents you actually want to prepare, and then you can just do one, or you can do more. This image doesn't actually reflect that. In addition to those forms, we also developed an opposition for summary judgment as well, which I will talk about in a minute. But basically, the pro bono attorney or the legal services attorney can just input the information that they need to, based on the information they have from the litigant, and keeping in mind that a lot of the attorneys who are assisting pro se litigants are not consumer experts, there are some there's information along the way to answer any questions. Lashes is a defense that I think all of us have probably heard of, and none of us really know what it is. And it's very rare that it's going to apply. But if you're sitting there with a litigant and you think that maybe lashes does apply. There is some information down there. There's case law, an explanation of the defense, and you can make a decision about whether or not you think that particular defense applies to that particular litigant. And so it's really I can't really emphasize enough how remarkable it is, because what happens is that you enter in the information, and then you can generate Word documents, which then you can also modify and add to or delete from. And so many times I've been at Claro sessions, and I would see attorneys hunched over a table with a litigant, handwriting information, taking notes or going through their documents, and then handwriting certain, using forms, but handwriting them, and literally crossing things out, and adding carets, and that can take up a lot of time. And when you've got people pounding down the door, every saved minute is really, really priceless. I think the best example of that is opposing a summary judgment motion, which we see a lot of, and more in New York City. The plaintiffs have gotten, the debt collection plaintiffs have gotten more aggressive and have started filing motions for summary judgment, which to a pro se litigant is incomprehensible at times. The motions are often include lots and lots of documents that claim to prove their case. Oftentimes they really don't. They don't have, their records are very sloppy. They have fake statements in them. They've got misinformation, information that doesn't even apply to that particular litigant. So I think for pro se consumers, being faced with a summary judgment motion is quite overwhelming. And when they bring that to a Claro session or call a legal services hotline, again, it's something that's going to take a while to really pour over and figure out, and then write an affidavit and a memorandum of law in opposition. And now that we have this resource that we've created with Pro Bono Net, it really, you can generate something in a matter of minutes, which has case law. It has kind of red flags throughout the questionnaire process, so to check whether the affiant has who claims to have personal knowledge about something really doesn't, and it sort of guides the attorney through all the really relevant questions to make sure that you're covering all the most basic arguments that you would use against a collection plaintiff. But then, because of the way that it's generated in a Word format, if you have a unique situation or want to add something, it's easy enough to do that. So it's really. I think that the next slide, kind of shows that, and I think I've said. I think it's very it's helpful for a range of people. I think, like I said, it's very helpful to people who don't necessarily know the area of law that well. But even when we have volunteer attorneys in our office who use the program, and they have probably more experienced than others, but they're not, like I said, they're not representing people, and so they just want to be able to assist someone, in a quick way, help generate it, and then they can even do it over the phone and then email it to the client, and so. It's really just created a lot of opportunities for us, and as we expand Claro, not only in other counties, but as we get more volunteers, we're really trying to incorporate technology into the training and into just the culture at Claro, so that the attorneys sort of expect that this is how they're going to do things. That being said, there are always challenges, and some of our Claro projects have been around for years, and some of the attorneys who participate in Claro, if they're just more comfortable, doing things, by hand and not using the computer. Some of them are just a little bit afraid of learning something new, and that's going to be a challenge with any sort of use of technology. But and I think there's also challenges where we sort of have, for example, we have New York City down pretty well. We kind of know how the courts operate, and what kind of information needs to be included. But if you try to expand the use of the forms to other courts or other locations that might not be exactly the same, it's hard to use the technology efficiently to accommodate that, when a lot of the front end goes into actually creating the interface. Very quickly, the last thing is that our relationship with Pro Bono Net also resulted in the creation of a website, the New York City Consumer Debt Defense website, that is really for consumer advocates in New York City, including those pro bono and Claro volunteers who would like to stay abreast of consumer issues, and it's a real resource for advocates, and include the library with a pleadings bank, recent news articles, recent cases. The forms are available for people with who are logged in and are allowed to have access to the forms. And so it's and then we also have we've done some podcasts about consumer issues, and really try to create a community for consumer advocates of all kinds. So that's pretty much it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has at the end. But I do think that I think that there are different kinds of laws that really do lend themselves to technology, and the consumer world is just one way that you can reach large numbers of people and really use your pro bono volunteers in an efficient and exciting way.
Great. Carolyn, thanks so much. I wanted to second what Carolyn was saying in terms of, my participation in the project has just really reaffirmed my belief more than almost anything else I've done here at Pro Bono Net in the power of technology to really transform the way legal services are delivered. It's really night and day between sort of pre-forms times and after. So it's been a fantastic project. So now we're going to move on to Liz Keith, our LawHelp program manager, who's going to talk to us about some of the sort of exciting and innovative next-generation technologies coming down the pipe. Liz, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Adam, and hi, everyone. Happy Pro Bono Week. So as Adam mentioned, I wanted to talk briefly about a couple of projects that have been designed to support volunteers using mobile technology, and then kind of pick up some of what Adam talked about in terms of remote services and talk about some additional models we're seeing in that area and some kind of new innovations coming down the pike. So I'll start off talking about one particular mobile project and then mobile generally. And this is a project that Pro Bono Net is involved with. It's funded by an LSC TIG grant to Legal Aid Services of Northeastern Minnesota. And the goal is to really leverage how central mobile technology has become in the lives of legal services advocates and volunteers to create a mobile version of Minnesota's statewide pro bono site, but that will feature in particular mobile optimized settlement checklists and client interview guides. And the project partners chose these two particular content types based on discussions and surveys of volunteers and advocates. Rather than kind of focusing on more generalized practice resources, they selected these tools for a couple of reasons. One is that for the checklist, settlements often happen in court or on short notice, but elements of a settlement in any area can have benefits and pitfalls that an inexperienced attorney or volunteer might overlook. So an example might be in a custody dispute, the parties may agree to a simple framework for custody, but forget to specify arrangements for important holidays, which might result in more litigation and unnecessary acrimony. So checklists can help those attorneys feel more confident and provide some added support in responding to those kind of on-the-go settlement opportunities while helping to ensure that clients get a well-crafted settlement. And then the mobile interview guides, in the same vein, are a kind of resource that can provide more support to both staff and volunteer advocates alike in these kinds of on-the-go settings like drop-in clinics or outreach events or other field-based work that tends to be the sort of bread and butter of a lot of the pro bono opportunities guide or pro bono opportunities in Minnesota. And these standardized guides can help practitioners get more complete or relevant information from clients, which in turn can help them spot important nuances or issues and provide better quality advice. So these will be available in sort of a special mobile optimized version, but there also will be desktop versions made available on the standard Pro Justice MN site for volunteers to be able to email themselves or print off or really use in whatever medium best fits their need for that particular moment, but was an area where, given the kind of on-the-go and sometimes ad hoc situations that volunteers might find themselves in, the project partners thought were a type of resource that had a particular value and importance in a mobile environment. So those resources will be live in 2014. There are a couple of other projects out there that are leveraging mobile that are in use now. Illinois Legal Aid Online, the Arkansas Legal Services Partnership, and Public Counsel program in LA have all developed mobile apps to connect volunteers with information about volunteering and practice resources. In the case of Arkansas and Public Counsel, those apps also have information about specific cases in need of volunteers. And then we're seeing kind of a growing trend of programs developing other types of screening resources that are sort of designed for mobile use by non-legal volunteers. So a domestic violence screening app and an app that is being used by a medical legal partnership here in the Bay Area to help social workers and nurses and others screen clients for legal issues and make appropriate referrals. So we'd love to hear what your ideas are for supporting volunteers through mobile technology. So feel free to share those in the chat box, and we can hopefully come back to some of them towards the end of the presentation here. So then shifting gears to remote services, we heard from Adam earlier about how technology has helped the New York Family Court Volunteer Attorney Program extend to Staten Island and eventually, hopefully, upstate as well. And we're seeing more models where programs are developing virtual legal clinics or virtual lawyer in the library programs to help extend the reach of traditional kind of brick and mortar pro bono services to places that may be, very distant geographically or perhaps less distant, but really difficult for volunteers to get to. So Staten Island is one example. Here in the Bay Area, particularly sort of when you get down into the peninsula, there are places that are, maybe only 60 or 70 miles distance-wise, but can end up taking a couple of hours to get to just because of either the kind of traffic or needing to go over a mountain and into a valley. So there's some interesting programs being developed. One is by the Pro Bono Project of Silicon Valley, which recently launched a virtual legal services clinic, which allows volunteer attorneys and community members to meet online through a video conferencing program. And the community member can right now participate from a couple of locations where these virtual clinics take place and kind of connect remotely with the volunteer. So in one case, that's a library. In another case, that's at the office of a bar association. And those local groups will really play a key role in outreach and advertising the virtual clinics to the community, as well as making appointments for the community members who need legal help. So the volunteer attorney and the community members meet by video conferencing, and then there's a supervising attorney from the Pro Bono Clinic, Pro Bono Project of Silicon Valley, who oversees every clinic and can engage in a private chat session with the volunteer if they have questions at any point in the session. And the sessions are, I think, limited to about 20 minutes, limited scope consultation over a range of topics. So one of the, I think, interesting aspects of this model that the partners have really thought about is ways in which to provide sort of added kind of technology support to the community members and the site locations where people are accessing this service in terms of having a dedicated workstation and a dedicated printer and an appropriate private space for the community member to participate in these clinics. And then there are also a number of models out there, programs that are based in at court-based self-help centers that are using remote document review tools within LawHelp Interactive to support having volunteer attorneys do document review remotely. And then I'll talk more about live chat and LawHelp in a moment. There's also, I think, sort of a growing trend of asynchronous online advice platforms out there. And I think one of the most well-known examples that has been highlighted in a couple of previous webinars in this series is online10justice.org, which allows volunteer attorneys throughout Tennessee to respond to questions from individuals who need legal advice and that are screened for eligibility and then have access to this platform to ask those questions online. So I wanted to pause for a couple of minutes on LawHelp and live chat models, which really started, I think, almost 6-7 years ago in Montana and Iowa, largely using national service volunteers, and have since expanded to really, I think, be an interesting model for engaging law students and private attorney volunteers. So this is kind of the lay of the land of LawHelp live chat services at the moment. These are the projects that I'm aware of in the kind of legal services or court community. And the basics of LawHelp are that an individual can engage in an online chat with a remotely located legal services staff person or volunteer to get the kind of assistance you see described here. In every case, there's some level of information finding and referral assistance provided, really usually drawing on resources from the underlying statewide website. In several states, volunteers are helping individuals access and use online self-help forms. In 2 states, they're also providing bilingual Spanish language assistance. And then in the coming year, through a LSE TIG-funded program, Legal Aid of Western Ohio will pilot chat-based pro bono counsel and advice. So building on and adapting a successful on-site pro bono clinic model they've had to develop opportunities for remote volunteer participation in assisting individuals in rural areas. So if we can just toggle back to the previous map for a moment, you'll see in green, these are the states where the live chat projects are currently using either law student or private attorney volunteers, and then the states in yellow are projects under development. So earlier, Marinda talked about some of the planning considerations for developing document assembly initiatives in a pro bono context, and some of those are also mirrored here, sort of considerations for using volunteers in LawHelp programs, I think include, the fact that the anywhere, anytime option for volunteers is can be very attractive. I think both for law students, and then we've heard feedback from some states who have private attorneys or emeritus attorneys who have very variable schedules, and may be able to dedicate a couple hours a week to the service over the summer, but may have other commitments during the rest of the year and have to sort of roll back their commitment, or may have heavy travel schedules, but be interested in sort of participating remotely, and LawHelp enables that. There's a fragment missing from the second bullet, but the New York LawHelp pilot program, which primarily uses law student volunteers, did a survey of those students after the first year or so of the service being live, and found that volunteers who participated in LawHelp said that they felt like they were more likely to do other forms of pro bono later on in their career as a result of their experience in the LawHelp program. We've also heard feedback from volunteers who say they actually kind of like the sort of Socratic method of learning that I think is inherent to a lot of LawHelp projects, where the individuals are really exposed to a wide range of questions. And also, I think in a lot of cases it can be a great opportunity for law students to learn more about the referral landscape or other kinds of online resources and access to justice tools that are available to help individuals. I think the models that use volunteers that have been the most successful do have robust online content for the volunteers to draw from and refer people to, so FAQs, information, other kind of self-help information, and referral information. Many of the LawHelp programs use a platform called LivePerson that provides some fairly robust reporting and administration tools that can also help project managers with supervision and support, and see how what kinds of questions are being answered, have access to an archive of the the chat transcripts and provide kind of extra support where needed. I think this second to last bullet point should probably have a big asterisk next with it, because it's one of the biggest considerations, which is that, of course, as with a number of other or many other models of that use volunteers, LawHelp programs that will require a greater investment in staff supervision, both during the ramp-up and recruitment phase, but also on an ongoing basis to help support that volunteer opportunity or that volunteer participation and help ensure kind of a high quality of service. And along those same lines, I think programs have found that having some kind of a back channel, real-time support for the volunteers is really important. So in many cases, or if not all, there's a project supervisor, project manager who's available during every volunteer shift by Google Chat or another kind of back channel communication mechanism to provide that assistance. And then looking ahead to the not too distant future, one program that isn't noted here but that actually just launched this week in conjunction with Volunteer Week is from Illinois Legal Aid Online, and I'll send an announcement, their press release through the chat box in a moment, but they recently, or just a couple days ago, launched a more sophisticated volunteer opportunity search and internship matching function for the community in Illinois. I think we're also seeing a number of programs look at similarly more sophisticated ways of marketing and matching cases to volunteers whose areas of interest or skill sets or language proficiency meet the needs of particular cases. One sort of really interesting idea that was talked about at the TIG conference earlier this year, and that I think continues to be an area that holds a lot of promise, is the idea of either semi or auto-generating a personalized referral packet for volunteers, perhaps based on resources from the statewide website or automated forms. So some case management systems are starting to allow this, where an advocate can kind of compile a packet consisting of letters to the client and pro bono attorney, any documents the client has supplied, information on the case type, and links to automated forms, and looking at ways to kind of tailor that packet for particular case types. And then something that I think is maybe a little bit still on the horizon that we'll start to see perhaps more activity around next year is the concept of more robust virtual law office platforms with secure client and volunteer portals. So Rocket Lawyer is one example that has been talked about at the LSC TIG conference to facilitate or provide unbundled or full services, I think particularly in a remote services context. And again, would love to hear any of your ideas about what you're doing now that we haven't talked about, or what you see coming down the pike and are really excited about in the year or so ahead.
Great. Liz, thank you so much. Folks, we want to thank everybody for attending. It's really great to have such an excellent turnout. And we want to thank Brian Rowe and Northwest Justice Project and LSNTAP for allowing us to be part of this great series. We have just a couple of minutes left. If folks have particular questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat box. There's also a couple of links in the box for a feedback survey. We'd really appreciate it if you took a few seconds to fill that out and let us know what's good and what's not so good, so we can do a better job next time. And the slides are also available online. Just click the link in the chat box.
If you are dialed in, you may also be able to hit *6 to unmute your line if you'd like to ask a question that way. One other quick announcement. We do have another webinar going on next week, which is going to be hosted by Anna Legal Aid. It's on the Share Law Video Project. It is next Wednesday, and there'll be an announcement going out to the listserv tomorrow covering that.
And I just wanted to highlight the next LSNTAP webinar will be on December 4th, Beyond Online Intake, looking at triage and expert systems. Again, that's on Wednesday, December 4th.
All right. Well, if there are no questions, then again, we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Really a pleasure to be with you. Please take a few seconds and fill out the survey, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much for hosting. Greatly appreciate it.